Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Media Snack live from New York. And it really is live. We do stream live every week.
It is. Greetings from London.
Right. This one really interesting. We're talking about robots today, which is kind of been on the fringes of the industry. And as we've been talking more about robots, I was reminded of a blog post. I was thinking we wrote about this a while back, and I went back, and it was 2013, so nearly 8 years ago. We started very nascent days of programmatic advertising, kind of ish then, and we thought at some point robots are going to take over the whole advertising industry, and it seemed like a bit of a pipe dream or a terrifying prospect, but it's happening. So, what's going on? So, before we get into what's going on, let's just think about the impact of technology on the media and advertising kind of process. Now, I want us to start at a very big level. If we think about what the internet has done for us, and the availability and access of information is really important. And if you think about these kind of established professions, think about like medicine and law and accounting. Those have been what we may have been called businesses that have relied on the asymmetry of information, right? You go to a lawyer because they just know much more about the law than you would ever do, right? And you're never going to read through all the books and go to law school. Same with accountants. They know how things work. And you go to the doctor and you ask their advice. But because we now have access to much more information than we've ever had before, people are self-diagnosing, right? It's quite common now for everybody to go see a doctor and say, I Googled this, or I found this on WebMD, or I've already figured out all the symptoms and diagnosed myself, which is good in some ways. I'm sure it causes some problems for doctors in other ways. The same's happening with the law. There are now self-service tools that have been built, and online filing of accounting. I mean, there was a big Super Bowl spot. TurboTax is a massive company here in the US. People self-serve all of this stuff. That's flattened that asymmetry of information. Question is, can the same thing happen in particularly the media market? Because the agencies traditionally kind of held onto that asymmetry, right? They were the access point to the entire marketplace for the advertiser. But now technology is kind of eroding that power, giving advertisers access to the market more directly. And now we're seeing more and more tools arrive that allow you to plan media using robots. We call it robots. It's technically called artificial intelligence or machine learning eventually, but we'll call it robots because at least it just makes it feel a bit less scary. So that's kind of what's going on. An interesting kind of story that broke this week that we'll come to talk about with an agency kind of revealing some new tools that they've got. And a few years ago, so this was back about 6-7 years ago, 8 years ago, we were hypothesizing then that we were saying that planners would save agencies because we could just see this race to the bottom happening. And if you click up here, you'll see the link to last week's episode where we talked about the end of the race to the bottom, that agencies were ceasing to just focus on cost as a differentiator, and that we were thinking about planning and insight being a differentiator of agencies. We thought back then planners have the opportunity to save agencies. But then a couple of years ago, we revealed our WPP playbook, right? When Mark Reed was taking over WPP, and we actually advocated, if you remember, for all the planners actually to leave media agencies and go within the creative agencies, Group M in that case, just to data, technology, and buying. So the bigger picture here is that there's a big looming question on the horizon for agencies, which is the role that they're going to play. They're having to try and stem the tide of advertisers in-housing, and they are trying to justify the role that they play. And it feels like now agencies are coming with their own robots to the table as their kind of maybe as their Hail Mary play, as we Americans say. So what's going on? What's happened this week that's interesting, that's prompted the debate?
Well, it's a good setup because you're right. It's about competitive advantage. It's about competitive advantage within the agency community, but it's also about providing competitive advantage for brands and advertisers that have got far greater demands on their agencies than perhaps they did in the past. And so Wavemaker, which is one of the big media agency networks of Group M, launched this week, or a couple of days ago, Maximize, which is an automated planning tool. Okay, and it is, as you said, fueled by machine learning, by artificial intelligence. And they've rolled this out across all of their kind of global network. And so the idea is that this machine, this tool, will enable far quicker development of media plans and the optimization of those media plans, allowing their clients to have smarter media plans quicker. I think one of the quotes that was said was that it can develop 100 media plan options within a matter of seconds, and then it optimizes them to death. So basically, it's about extracting the greatest kind of efficiency and effectiveness of these media plans at a far faster rate than perhaps human planners would be able to do. And that,
million. I think
100 million.
Right. Like, who needs 100 million? Well, maybe
exactly. But what they've interestingly done in their kind of press release is they illustrated how they tested human planning brains against the machine. And, the machine won naturally. They were able in 90 seconds to come up with the right kind of plans, whereas the human media planners obviously didn't quite get to that level of delivery. But anyway, but it's fascinating because, we've seen that, perhaps the pioneer of this type of machine learning planning tool was Blackwood 7, that was very prominent maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I mean, there's LC Bionic are offering AI-driven planning tools, but this is the first, as far as I'm concerned, of the big networks that are using this ubiquitously across all of their markets to help enable smarter thinking through machine learning for their clients. And again, they're betting that this is going to deliver competitive advantage for them as a network, because it will deliver competitive advantage for them as for their clients who use it. So fascinating stuff. But as a planner in the past, as a human planner in the past, what do you make of it?
Well, I think that we always say, look, it's a people business. Marketing's a people business. So you can say that about any industry, right? Because it's historically been staffed by humans, and so much of the industry in the past has been fueled by personal relationship.
Yeah.
And I think I find that more, having worked in the US for a while now, that it's even more acute here, or more extreme. I would say that so much business is done on human relationships, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Right? It shouldn't be bad about that. But that's it. The fact is that when you're a marketer and you've got hundreds of millions of dollars at stake, or billions of dollars of growth at stake, it's actually quite precarious to have such vast amounts of business reliant on human relationships. And actually, human relationships are pretty inefficient, actually, a pretty inefficient way of getting things done. And so passing communication from one human to another is a pretty slow process, isn't it? And waiting for that person to do the work and then get the response. We often paint this, kind of illustrate this picture when we're advising advertisers, sometimes in pitches, for example, or we're talking to advertisers about the briefs that they have to write to their agencies, is we kind of say, look, you are a giant multi-billion-dollar corporation, and you've hired this agency, which is a giant multi-billion-dollar corporation. And the interface between the two of you is sometimes a really crappy Word document. That's what is going on between the two of you. And you've got such capabilities.
Yeah.
You think, God, there should be much better integration actually between these as partnerships. And that's what we try and design, these kind of, really good quality client agency relationships to be much more symbiotic, if that's not such a pretentious word. Because that quality of that piece of paper that gets passed backwards and forwards, and then the Excel sheet with the media plan on it, and then the corrections, and then all the emails chains that go around, I think that is such an inefficient way. And of course, that all of that could be done so much better through technology, which just sees the opportunity to optimize. The experiment that Wavemaker had done, that you mentioned, which was to test their human planners, and Wavemaker have some amazing media planners. Great agency. They were setting tasks that actually even the best planners couldn't even fulfill, because they were finding it impossible to actually really find the optimized investment spread across different channels to try to maximize effective reach and things like that. These are great bread and butter bits of, bread and butter kind of KPIs for media. I say bread and butter in the sense that they're really important, not that they're trivial. Finding effective reach for your spend, given an objective, great. Why don't we just let a machine do that? And the machine could do it in seconds, something that human teams couldn't even figure out. So great. So I'm not precious about the craft of planning so much like that. I think this is great. I think, but the really interesting point in terms of implication is, you know, the technology is not the sole domain of the agency. So having a tool like this at the moment might be an interesting differentiator for the agency, because it might call some people watching this might go, okay, I'm going to call Toby at Wavemaker and I'm going to find all about this, and this sounds great. But it's got to be more than a pitch theatre. It's got to be more than something that sits on the creds. It's got to be something which is really differentiating for the agency, and it's got to show actual results. Because the risk is that somebody, I mean, you mentioned Blackwood 7. I think maybe it's a bit before its time. I'm not even sure whether they're still active or not. Somebody at some point is going to have, a media planning tool like this, and it could be companies like LC or Bionic, and there's many others, are going to make this widely available to advertisers. And before you know it, advertisers, they can get their hands on the keys to these machines and find that they can optimize their budgets very, very well. Thank you very much. Now, will they? And then it just starts to, you have to consider that bigger impact. Like, what does that mean for agencies? What does that mean for, where agencies, things like, do agencies need, expensive midtown offices? Do we need planners in tall, shiny buildings in Manhattan? What role are they going to play? Right? Do media agencies go down that route of supplying the technology and the data and doing some executional buying highly efficiently? Or over time, are those tools which actually advertisers are going to take control of, and then they do want the humans there? Either be at the beginning of that process, just kind of set KPIs, set strategic platforms and direction, or maybe towards the end of the process. I called it icing the cake, where you got machine does all the optimization, and then you have planners that come in and really, maybe bring that to life and make some activation ideas. So that's it. I mean, I always like challenging these things with a what we call a shoulda versus coulda approach. It's very easy and ad tech is very guilty of that. We invent things just because we can, and we sell them to marketers. And it's just confusing. And we have sympathy for the marketers who say, look, do I need all of these things? Sometimes you've got tools that are solving tools that that are solving problems that other tools create. It's kind of getting a bit extreme. So the marketer's got to kind of be quite clear about what they want. And we should do things that the marketer wants, not things that we think we could do.
Agreed.
And there's this, in this 2013 article that I mentioned, there was a sentence there that I think is still so relevant today, and we'll link to it below. We'd written, if media buying becomes more automated, how long, this is 8 years ago, how long before media agencies depart their high overhead Soho offices? It will be interesting to see which big networks will be the first to ship its media people out, or robots out to the suburbs, is what we said then. Now, obviously, this kind of distributed workforce approach, people are moving out to the suburbs, but increasingly we're seeing offshoring with agencies. We've had, I think Wendy Clark at Dentsu has specifically said, she said in an interview this week, I think, they'll look to offshore more services. We've heard from other groups that they're seeking to offshore some operating and technology resources, offshore to cheaper territories. And we're seeing some of our clients getting offers from their agencies to offshore a lot of services. Now, what's the chicken and egg of that? Are they just trying to reduce costs to find margin themselves, or are they under pressure to reduce costs? I think it's a combination of both. I think the main thing is that advertisers are basically telling agencies it's a good chance that we could do this more effectively and more cost efficiently than you can.
Well, it's a challenge, isn't it? They're laying down the gauntlet. That's what they're saying. They're saying, okay, right, our demands are greater now. Now illustrate that you can continue to add value as a core partner. And as a marketeer, within this and based on the maximize story, my core question is whether it's being done by humans or whether it's being done by machine learning and an automated tool. I want to know how it's making my media investment more effective. I mean, ultimately, all I care about, quite frankly, is whether the thinking or the tool that is developed and executed is driving some form of business outcome. Right? That's all I really care about. And if this new tool, if the smarts within it enables my media investment to be more effective and productive, and that it drives my business forward, then hallelujah, I'll embrace it. And you know what? If that's competitive advantage within the marketplace, then I'll come to you over anybody else. If that's not delivering competitive advantage, then I'm either going to think about building it myself, or I'm going to go to somebody that can help me be smarter when it comes to developing my plan. I think it comes down to that one thing: is this going to enable my media plan and my media investment to work harder than before? And that, I think, is probably what Maximize is going to have to illustrate and prove fairly quickly.
Yeah, and we'll come on just to think about what marketers should be doing. So I know you've got some kind of good thoughts on that. Before we do, let me just say that if you have comments or questions on this, we tend to find on Media Snack is that you all send questions like right at the end, and then we have to close the episode and we never get to do them. So if you do have any burning questions or comments to make, then please, there's a couple coming through already. Please so we can kind of address those before we close the show. Yeah, right. So advice for marketers then.
Yeah, I think it's that. I think it's to explore this as an option, talk to their agencies to see what is out there that is enabling smarter thinking on media plans, and asking them to justify or illustrate how it can make that media investment more effective. Are my competitors using it? If they are, then what drives competitive advantage for me? If they're not using it, then why not? What's the problem kind of with it? But also, I mean, there's been this debate around, do you replace human interaction with a machine? I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I think that actually there's always going to be that human element. And we've talked at length in the past about the challenge for agencies is to humanize the impact of technology in their offering. And I think that this is another thing. There will always need to be that human interaction, that person that can help articulate and bring into a normal language the brilliance perhaps that these machines and these technologies offer. But don't lose that, because that's the power. That's where the real connection lies. You need to have somebody that can humanize, that can bring this into a language that marketers and media leaders buy into. But I think this is really exciting, but it has to fundamentally do one thing. It has to illustrate its ability to drive greater effectiveness of media investment.
Yeah. And in a practical sense, I mean, we're working with a few advertisers right now who are deliberating around this space, and exploring and experimenting with this idea. And our advice to them, and we think is good practice, is to try, think of it like as a multi-level pilot. So develop a work stream, try and get some mandate or permission internally to be able to develop some form of pilot. So try it in one market, try it for one maybe smaller brand or one division of the company, and work with your agency tools on that respect. But also see if you can carve out an opportunity to test these tools yourselves.
Yeah,
that's where we're gonna find the comparison, because it could be that the real differentiator, obviously, is the quality of inputs into these programs is vital. And as we find more advertisers actually being less willing to share their own proprietary data, their own sales data, or their own internal insights with external parties, potentially they're at a huge advantage to be able to get more value out of these kind of tools, because they can put better quality information in and link that information back to their business results. So
yeah,
for the advertiser side, try and get permission, try and find some people that you can collaborate with internally to test a pilot. And give it a go over 3 months, 6 months, or a campaign cycle or something, and let's have a look at the results. Good. Listen, we'd love to. There are some questions coming in, but of course, we're wrapping up the show. So we'd love your thoughts on this, because it's something which I think there's been a lot of commentary across the industry. When I say across the industry, it's like the 200 people on Twitter that really kind of care about these things and actually got things to do. But it's split debate a little bit, to the point where actually even Wavemaker have kind of stepped into this kind of discussion to try and referee it a bit or clarify their position. we'll link to some of that discussion because it's worth following. If you have more thoughts, please leave them down below or chuck them on social media. You can always tag us in that if you want to. But that's it. Please subscribe or join us every week. We are live every Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. UK time, and around the world. If you subscribe and click the bell, you will be alerted when we're going live. But that's it for this week. Yet another big looming challenge for the industry to tackle, but it's all good fun.
See you next time.